today, Sunday, the 25th day of Tishrei, the 27th day of October, 2024. Today's class graciously sponsored by Alan Shrem and family, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved father, Moshe ben Zimbol, Alev Shalom. Additionally, today's class dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of Menachem ben Belina among all of the Cholim of Am Yisrael, as well as continuous praying for the safe return of the hostages and the well-being of the soldiers in Eretz Israel. So we finish a 3-marathonic day of Shemini Aseret, Simchat Torah, and Shabbat Bereshit. That means that we didn't really speak much about Shabbat Bereshit, about the Perashah of Bereshit. Even on Shabbat, the time was very, very limited. But I'll tell you, before I start with Bereshit and moving into Noah, I'll tell you that today is the Hilulah of two great Tzadikim. One known as the famous Hatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer, Alav Shalom, 1762-1839. You have heard me quoting the great Hacham on his fascinating commentaries on the Torah, and obviously in the world of Halacha. Additionally, today is the Hilulah of the great Kedushat Levi, Rabbi Levi Ishak of Bardichov, which was known as Sanegoran Shel Israel. He was the advocate of the Jewish people. And this is something that we can discuss about the two Tzadikim. The Hatam Sofer, he was a very, very great Talmid Chacham, literally great Talmid Chacham. You can see in his halachic responses and Torah commentaries, but he was also very firm in not diluting or negotiating when it came to Torah principles. And this is something that perhaps we may take it for granted by saying, how can someone dilute the Torah? How can somebody belittle or minimize the Torah? But we must remember that in that generation where the great Hatam Sofer lived, regretfully, there were those who figured, let's adjust the Torah to the times. And therefore, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us, the famous Mishnah that we quoted the other day on the Ushpizin of Aharon HaKohen, Karevan la Torah. Our goal is to raise the people, to lead the people to the Torah. Like the story that one day in Eretz Israel, they inaugurated a kindergarten. Gan Yeladim, as they call in Hebrew, right? Kindergarten. And a big rabbi is invited to come to give a beracha to the school. And then the rabbi noticed that the mezuzot of the kindergarten were very low. According to the halacha, just to remind ourselves, there is a basic halacha in the halachot of mezuzah, that the proper placement of the mezuzah in the doorpost, if I'll take this whiteboard, let me do a doorpost, okay? So you have already one halacha in this design, that the mezuzah needs to have three sides, the top, the left, and the right. And obviously, this has a lot of details, depends if it's a continuous ceiling or if the ceiling goes down, and if there is a wall or a continuous wall, but I'm giving you. So according to the halacha, let's say that the height of this door post, okay, is, let's do it, Miami style condominiums, maybe 82 inches. Homes are higher, but condominiums, because of the limitation of the ceiling, they may have maybe 82 inches, especially if the apartment has maybe 8 feet tall or 7 feet high. So basically, how do you determine where the mezuzah goes? So according to the halacha, you measure the height and you divide it 3. So I already know 26 times 3 is 78. plus I have 4 inches left over. So I add another inch and a quarter, let's say. So let's say 27 inches from the top. That is the proper placement of the mezuzah. But in this school, they put the mezuzah on the second half. This is the proper kosher way, and this is the not kosher way. So exactly. So the rabbi asked, why did you put the mezuzah so low if it's not kasher? So the teacher said, oh, I did it for the students. The rabbi says, you never lower the Torah for anyone. Your goal is lift the child to the Torah. You understand the difference? You understand the difference? And that's why the Mishnah says, un caravan la Torah. You bring the people up to the Torah. You don't dilute the Torah to make it convenient from people. And the halakha, Baruch Hashem, thanks to our great Talmidei Chachamim throughout history, the halakha has certain parameters. You have sometimes the most strict opinion, the middle of the road opinion, the leniencies, whatever halachic parameters a person uses. But this reminds me of a story of a fellow who wanted to have multi-personalities. For Selihot, he wanted to become Ashkenazic. For Pesach, he wanted to be Sephardic. And for the 9 days, he wanted to be Yemenite. Sure, because Yemenites, they only don't eat meat Erev Tisha B'Av. They eat meat through the entire week. And we know Sephardic in Pesach is much more practical and easier than Ashkenazic. And Selihot, we may be more lenient in Pesach, but we got 40 days of Selihot. Ashkenazi may be more strict in Pesach, but only a few days of Selihot. God forbid, we're not mocking anyone, but this fellow wanted to be this way. So the Gemara writes, כל העושה מחומרות בית שמאי ובית הלל. כל העושה מקולות בית שמאי ובית הלל. The Gemara says, imagine yourself that one day you wake up and you say, you know what? I want to be mahmir. I want to be super strict. Give me all the opinions of strictness from Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. You may say, wow, Hazaku Baruch. The Gemara says that's wrong. You cannot dance in 2 weddings at the same time. Or the other extreme, I follow the leniencies of Bet Shammai and I follow the leniencies of Bet Hillel. The Gemara says that's also wrong. That's why the Mishnah writes in Pirkei Avot, Aseh lecha Rav. Make yourself one rabbi. One rabbi. So that's what happened with the Hatam Sofer. The Hatam Sofer was a great Talmid Chacham, and he carried with pride the flag of the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu without negotiating the Torah. This is the way the Torah is, all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu and Am Yisrael. We do not dilute the Torah. This was the great Hatam Sofer. The Kedushat Levi. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichov, just to know chronologically, he lived, I believe, 2 generations after the Baal Shem Tov. Me too. I went 3 times, I think, to his kever, 1740, 1839, 1809, Mehila. And he was known as the advocate of the Jewish people. What does it mean, the advocate of the Jewish people? So they tell a very famous story that one day he saw a Jew eating meat and dairy on Tisha B'Av. Now, once you hear meat and dairy, that's already a problem. And on Tisha B'Av, come on, if you're going to eat on Tisha B'Av, don't eat publicly, go to your home, that's between you and God. So the rabbi sees him on the street and he says, how are you, Moshe? Let's call him Moshe. No, Rabbi, thank God, everything good. Do you know that today is Tisha B'Av? Of course, Rabbi, I know today is Tisha B'Av. And do you know that on Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to eat? unless we're dealing with medical cases. Of course, who doesn't know that on Tisha B'Av you don't eat? And do you know that what you're eating is meat and dairy, taref? The fellow says, yes, of course. So in that moment, the Kedushat Levi turns up to Akadosh Baruch Hu, and it says, Akadosh Baruch Hu, look at the honesty of the Jewish people, that even that he is sinning, and he could have told me, oh, Rabbi, I didn't know that today is Tisha B'Av. Thank you for the reminder. He was honest. It's like he wrote when Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur happens to be on Shabbat. He wrote a cute statement, and it says to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, again, you must understand his mindset. Remember that he lived in the Ukraine. The Ukraine, how sympathetic we may be today with the Ukrainian people because of the war, and people go to Uman, to the kever of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, and other Tzadikim, of course, Baal Shem Tov, the Kedushat Levi, and others, the Ukrainians were very anti-Semitic. That's the reason why Rabbi Nachman is buried in Uman, because there was a moment in history that over 40,000 Jewish people were massacred by the Ukrainians. And he says, I want to be in the land of the Kedoshim. Don't take me to Israel. Although any day he will be taken to Israel, but the Ukrainian government will not be too happy about it because they're losing a lot of revenue. And sure, you go to Uman, you have 16 hotels. No, Jendi Bendi, Yani, no cheapy. You went there with us, right? Unbelievable. Oh, did you go with us? Nice. We had a beautiful trip, by the way. Nice. Going back a few years when traveling was easy. Today, if you travel to Uman, you got a plan for border time. Depends which airport you land, how many hours you got to drive. I think somebody told me 12 hours. You land in Moldova, right? And from Moldova, you drive 10 to 12 hours. Also, you got to walk the border and then drive. I don't know, Rohi. You asked me a question that I'm not sure, I don't have an answer. But what I'm trying to say is just to illustrate for a moment that when we say that we are living in Gan Eden to a certain extent, compared to how the Tzadikim of yesteryear, they needed to live, and they lived literally. So their accomplishments, it's beyond our understanding. Now, so the Kedushat Levi had a cute saying, and it says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, you wrote in your Torah, we have to listen to the Hachamim. It's a pasuk in the Torah. Al pi Torah, asher yorucha. We follow the guidelines of the Hachamim. And the Gemara writes, in Makot, I believe, yesh din lemata and din lema'ala. Once in the planet Earth, so to speak, we settle matters, the heavenly court does not get involved. Wait, because we're recording live. I'll open the floor for questions in a few minutes. So that's the Gemara. That's the reason why whenever there is a dispute, etc., what do we tell people? Don't delegate the decision to the heavenly judicial court system, because the din shel ma'ala is much more strict than din shel mata. That's why the Gemara says, yesh din lemata and din lema'ala. Once we took care of the matter here, doesn't matter. We settled, we made an agreement, we gave in a bit, the other side gave in a bit, Chazak Baruch, case closed. So he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Erev Kippur, like this year, that happened to be on Shabbat. And he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Hachamim establish that on Shabbat we're not allowed to write, correct? Since we are not allowed to write, you're not allowed to write. So therefore, by default, you should give the entire Jewish people a ketiva b'hatima tova, guaranteed approval. That was the greatness of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichov. He will always see the cup half full instead of half empty. Even in the face of adversity and whatever challenging moments, he was always look at things, where is the positive light, even among the darkness. The way our Hachamim tell us, Kesat or dohe arbe min hachoshech. A bit of light dissipates a lot of darkness. Is what we learned yesterday afternoon. Now we're moving on a bit into Perashah Bereshit. We find very strange incidents yesterday. The Nahash pushes Hava, Hava eats, Adam eats, they pay the price, then God comes around and calls out Adam Arishon, Ayeka. Then later on, the incident, the tragic incident, unfortunately, between Cain and Hevel, and God comes and asks Hevel, Hevel achicha, where is Hevel, your brother? So in both circumstances, Rashi teaches us a fascinating lesson in the way that we should live our life, and has nothing to do with religiosity. In other words, has nothing to do with the halakha matter, but it has to do with the way that we handle situation in life. And Rashi brings a few examples. Number one, Ayeka, when God asks Adam Arishon, where are you? The second case Rashi brings down is which one? The concept of Cain and Hevel, Hevel achicha. The third case it brings is the case of Bilam, when Balak sends the messengers to hire Bilam to curse the Jewish people. God comes to Bilam, and it says, Mi ha'anashim ha'ele. Who are these people that came to visit you? What, God doesn't know what Adam is? God doesn't know that Cain killed Hevel? God doesn't know that who are these people, etc. But if you look in Rashi, let me just find you the magnificent, right here, 1 second, right here. Vayikra Hashem Elokim el Adam vayomer lo ayeka. Where are you? Rashi says, Yodea haya echanhem. He knew where they were. So why did he ask him? Likanes imo bedevarim shelo yeh nibhal lehashiv. Im yanishehu pitom bechen Cain bechen Bil'am, bechen Hizkiyahu HaMelech, etc. Rashi is telling us something about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even though the Perashah Bereshit, we can leave, so to speak, God's feelings and reaction a moment to the side, we can concentrate on Adam and Hava. We can concentrate Cain in Hevel. We can concentrate how challenging was the world, that to the point that God at the end of the Perashah, what does it say? At the end of the Perashah, God says the following Lashon, Menachem Hashem ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz vayit'atzev el libo. God says, I don't understand. I created the world, I created people, and it was a recipe for disaster. And the pasuk says, "Vayit'asev el libo." What does that mean? It'atsev el libo. God regretted. Vayomer Hashem emchet ha'adam asher barati me'al ha'adama. You know what? I'm going to press the reset button. I'm going to do copy, cut, and delete. What happens if you do that? The file is gone, right? That's exactly what God says. You know what? Maybe I should do copy, cut, delete, and reset. That's what the pasuk says. Ki nihamti ki asitim benoach matza hen be'enei Hashem. And Noah found favor in the eyes of the Almighty. Allow me to bring one more, and then I'm going to expand on the connection between all these isolated, or I shouldn't say isolated, God forbid, but scattered verses that I just quoted. Another one, it says, Naase Adam besalmenu kidmutenu. God says, when it comes to the creation of mankind, God says, let us make man in our format and in our image. And the question is, who is God talking to? Vayomer Elokim naase Adam. What, did God have partners in the creation? Of course not. So comes Rashi and it says, Antavuto shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu lamadnu mikan. God is talking to the Malachim. But the Malachim didn't help God to create the world. There was no physical creation. In what sense? When the world was created, it was created by talking. Bidbar Hashem Shamayim Na'asu. With the word of God. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, Vayhi Or. One of the differences between the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I need to be careful what I'm saying now, but I hope that I'm using the correct words, and humans, is that a human can create things. Meaning to say, if I take water and flour and I mix them, have dough, then I put it in the oven, I make bread. That creation is called yesh meyesh. Something from something. So far so good. I have fabric, I have thread, I have a needle, I'm able to make a garment. But I need the materia prima. How do you call this in English? I need the materials, the raw materials. Otherwise, I cannot make it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does yesh me'ayin. Yesh me'ayin. Something out of nothing. So then the question is, if that's the case, why did God utilizes a plural language? Let us make men in our form, in our image. Who is he talking about? So Rashi says the Torah is teaching us the humility of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What was the humility? That he requested the advice of the Malachim. From here, Rashi teaches us there is no embarrassment to a Gadol ask from a Katan. There is no embarrassment that somebody as great as HaKadosh Baruch Hu consults with something smaller. For example, the Gemara tells us that when the incident of the Egel took place, unfortunately, Hashem wanted to appoint Betzalel. Betzalel was the architect of the Mishkan. Betzalel was the grandson of Caleb ben Yefuneh. The father of Betzalel, I believe, was killed in the rebellion against God with the Egel. So how old was Betzalel when God chooses him to build the Mishkan? 12 years old. A young man. God blessed him with wisdom. That's why it's called Betzalel. Betzalel, the shadow of God, so to speak. So God says to Moshe, Moshe, Hagun lefanecha Betzalel. Imagine God comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and asks Moshe, Moshe, what do you think if I appoint Betzalel to become the architect of the Mishkan? What Moshe says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, if you approve, of course I'm going to approve. So what God says to Moshe, wait, go ask the Jewish people. So imagine yourself, Moshe Rabbeinu comes to God, to the Jewish people, He says, Am Israel, I have an application form for somebody called Besalel ben Uri ben Hur Lemate Yehuda. God approved the application. I approve the application. What do you think? Do you approve it or not? So what the Jewish people answer, Moshe Rabbeinu, if you approve it and God's approve it, for us it's approved. Yet they ask, why? Because of this Rashi. One more. When God says to Moshe, Moshe, I want you to appoint Yoshua to become the next leader of the Jewish people. And what God says to Moshe, Besamachta et yadecha alav, place your hand on his head. Yani now you're appointed to become the next leader of Israel. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do in the parasha that we read in Simchat Torah? Yadav, he put both hands. Now, if God said to Moshe, put one hand, why did Moshe did two? Short answer, Moshe Rabbeinu says, if I put one hand, suddenly they're going to say, did you see? Moshe Rabbeinu put only one hand. Was it the right hand or was it the left hand? No, I think it was the left. Yeah, it depends. If you're standing in front of Moshe, it's the left. If you're standing next to Moshe, it's the right. So Moshe Rabbeinu knew that all these comments may come up. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I need to leave a clear record that Yoshua is appointed on my behalf. So Moshe Rabbeinu, to dissipate all the doubts, what did he do? Besamach et yadav. Both hands. So there will not be questions. By the way, remember the story that the Gemara tells us when connected to the Ta'anit of the 10th of Tevet, that there were 3 days of fast day. One was the 8th of Tevet, the 9th of Tevet, and the 10th of Tevet. We only fast on the 10th of Tevet, because that was when Nebuchadnezzar sieged the city of Jerusalem, and 2.5 years was the Bet HaMikdash. But why was there a Ta'anit that we don't do today, but there was a time in history that people fasted on the 8th of Tevet? Because the Torah was translated into the Greek language. Remember when the king of Egypt, Ptolemy, summoned 72 Hachamim, and he says, I want each and every one of you to translate the Torah, and he put them in separate locations so there will not be copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. And the miracles were that all the Hachamim, by divine providence obviously and divine guidance, they made changes in the Torah in order to minimize questions from the Goim. You know which one was the first and second change that they made? They made it to avoid the Goim questioning the veracity of the Torah. Change number 1, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim be'et haaretz. What is the meaning of that verse? Please. Bereshit, in the beginning. Okay, you and I agree, but you know what the Greeks understood? Bereshit is somebody created God. So what did they write? What did they write? Elokim, God, bara Bereshit, created in the beginning, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Now, the Torah, I said this yesterday, no recording, obviously, but I'm going to say it now. We discussed why was the Torah started with the letter Bet and not with the letter Aleph. One answer given was that the Bet is Beracha and the Aleph is Arur, curse. Number 1. Number 2, when you look at the shape of the letter Aleph, look at it right there. The Aleph, look at the Aleph. Aleph and Bet together, look. The Aleph can go in many directions. Top, bottom, left, right, front, back. The Bet goes one direction. So you know what the Torah is telling us? Go forward. Don't start asking yourself what happened before, how many worlds were created, how did the world become into being, because asking these questions will bury us mentally, because we don't understand. We are humans and we have certain limitation. But in order for the Goim not to misunderstand the Torah, they wrote Elokim, bara bereshit, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. God created in the beginning the heaven of the earth. Second change, the one that talks about let us make men. You know what they wrote? Vayomer Elokim, e'aseh adam besalmi vechidmuti. I will make humans in my format, in my image. God spoke in a humble way, in our format, in our ways. I need an advice. So the Torah is teaching us that God himself has humility. You know, yesterday, in the creation of the world, I came across a Rashi, very fascinating, when talks about the creation of the Leviathan. Okay, Rashi, the Pasuk says, Vayivra Elohim et hataninim hagedolim. God created the big whales. That's how the English translation is. Rashi says, Dagim gedolim shebayam, mega fishes in the ocean, ulibiatanu bat zugo. And Rashi says, this refers actually to the Leviathan and his partner, Sheberaam Zachar Unekeva. Because if the world is all about reproduction, so the only way to reproduce is male and female. So also in the fish, you need to have male and female. In other words, the same laws of nature that applies to humans, the same laws of nature applies to animals. So what did God do? God separated, so to speak, removed the female from the male. They never made it. Why not? Because if she will become pregnant. Lo yitkayem ha'olam bifnehem. The water, so to speak, of the ocean will overflow to a certain extent that the water will take over the earth. And you can say Kaddish on the earth. Yeah, anybody has a book of Tehillim here? But don't go, it's here. Barechi nafshi, Rosh Chodesh. Barechi nafshi et amonai, la 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 la. Hazak Baruch. So what does it say in the middle of the chapter? Leviathan ze yasarta lesachik bo. You created the Leviathan to play with him. Wait, what do you mean? You play sheshbesh? What do you play? Mojang, whatever. What are you playing with the Leviathan? Okay, Frisbee, what are you playing with the Leviathan? The Gemara writes that every day HaKadosh Baruch Hu spends an hour, so to speak, with the Leviathan. Spends time with the Leviathan. Why? Because God says, Hazid, the Leviathan, is missing his spouse, his mate. The Leviathan, we learned this in Kippur. In the break after Musaf, we learn the story of Yonah Navi. And we learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes a deal with the Leviathan. What is the deal? It says, Leviathan, I'm going to have Uber Eats every day for you. The Mefarshim don't say Uber Eats, but I put Uber Eats. You don't have to leave your safety zone. I will deliver food to you every day. And every day since the week of the creation of the world, the first week, the Leviathan stays relaxed, and one fish becomes the food for the Leviathan that day. So that day that Yonah Navi was inside of the fish took him in a tour. I want to go into the 20,000 miles under the water. Remember, how many? Hazako Baru, Julius Verne. You remember that? I remember that from elementary school. I went to school. What do you think? I remember the book. I don't remember the movie because it was assignment. We needed to write about it. Anyways, so can you imagine Yonah Navi is shown the Leviathan. And that day, that fish was the feeding of the Leviathan. So Leviathan says, Yonah says to the Leviathan, now I know where are you and who you are. Mashiach comes, I'm going to come and get you. And if you look at the song that speaks about Mashiach's arrival, food, Ma nochal b'se'udah zot. Mashiach comes. We're going to have a menu. We're going to have food. What do you think? So without Mashiach, it's no food? Like food today is important, Mashiach comes, food is also going to have a special sa'udah. And it says, Yaina meshumar, wine from the time of Adam and Hava, Shor Habor, and the Leviathan. The Leviathan, whatever it's called. Sure, that's the skin of the Leviathan. But what about the meat of the Leviathan? That's going to be the fish part of the meal. So you're going to have wine, you're going to have fish, you're going to have beef. Great quality. I'm not sure if it's a tomahawk steak the way, or you said rabbi steak. Okay, ribeye steak, maybe. Okay, or tomahawk, I don't know the name, the new name of the steak, right? It's called tomahawk. Tomahawk, okay. Huh? It's going to be kasher. Will be kasher. As of now, I don't know. I never saw one. Listen, if it's in the menu, must be kosher. It's like you go to a fish or you go to a meat restaurant and there is a disclaimer, the consumption of raw fish, right? So in some restaurants that they offer, let's say, meat with some type of dairy, it tells you non-dairy cheese. Yani it's part. They have to tell you so people don't. I remember 30 years ago. Maybe you remember. Remember the store called Sara's Pizza? Remember Sara's Pizza? That's it, 125th Street, 96, Bay Harbor. Beautiful. So I'm eating there. Now, we ate the schmopper. He was the innovator of a parm hamburger with cheese. So I'm eating with my family pizza, French fry. It was very common back then in the 90s in South Florida. Probably one of the two kosher restaurants that maybe we had Embassy, Sarah's Pizza, right? Jerusalem, and maybe I don't have names. 2 or 3. Today, over 100, Ben Porat Yosef. Maybe more. So I'm eating with the family. Then a very religious fellow says, Rabbi, is this restaurant kosher? After he finished eating, he asked me. I said, what prompted the question? I asked him. No, because I saw somebody next to me that's having a burger with cheese. I said, he from Brooklyn, I said, no. Everything is kasher. The mashgiach is in the kitchen. This is the ashgaha. I'm eating. I said, so how can they have? He said, no, it's a soy burger type of meat. Today it's called, how do you call it? Possible burger. But back then was a soy burger, pure synthetic. But very, very delicious. That was a very popular thing. So the Hachamim, to avoid this type of scenarios, they made certain changes. But I was talking about the Leviathan. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spends time with the Leviathan every day. Because the Leviathan says, I'm not able to move, I'm not moving. Okay, it's very cute. Can you imagine you order Uber Eats every day of your life? You get tired of it. Of course. So God comes and spends time with the Leviathan because Hashem is the one who blocked the reproduction of the Leviathan. Again, we can go back to the creation of the sun and the moon. Same thing happened in the creation of the sun and the moon. What happened when the moon comes to God? If you look in the Pasuk, it says that the sun and the moon right here, they were exactly the same size. והיו למאורות ברכי השמיים להאיר על הארץ. They were exactly the same. So the moon, innocently, ויעש אלוקים את שני המאורות הגדולים, they were connected, they were the same size. And Rashi writes that later on, the moon was shrunk because she came to God with an innocent question. God, if one runs the day, how come we have two of the same? God says, you know what? Shrink. Shrink yourself. Lechi uma'ati et atzmech. It was not a complaint. It was an innocent question. But you know what God says? No, Haz v'shalom. You know what God says? I've sinned against the moon. I caused the moon emotional pain. It's like there are two contestants, and then you say, you won. What about the other one? Give him a chance. Where do we see this? In the offering of Rosh Chodesh. The offering of Rosh Chodesh, the Pasuk says, Us'ir izim echad lehatat laHashem. One sin offering to atone for God. What do you mean to atone for God? Since when God sins? God says, I cause pain to the moon. So every Rosh Chodesh, since Rosh Chodesh is based on the moon, not on the sun, the Jewish calendar follows the moon. The Gentile Gregorian calendar follows the sun. The Jewish calendar follows the moon. That's why there is a discrepancy. Sometimes 350 days, 352, 355, sometimes 330 something. And leap year builds up again the discrepancy in the numbers. But every Rosh Chodesh, God says, please offer a sin offering for God. Is the Pasuk. Us'ir izim ehad, one goat, lehatat laHashem. A sin offering for God. We are atoning for God's comment to the moon. So God says, please offer it on my behalf. On the Leviathan, since the Leviathan, we have no access, we don't even see the Leviathan, we don't even know how the Leviathan looks, God says, I deal with it personally. What does he do? God says, I'll spend time together. Why the Torah brings us all these interesting concepts from the Torah? According to Rashi, the Torah should have skipped all Sefer Bereshit, put it on the side, and begin Perashat Bo from Perashat Bo that deals with the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. The first mitzvah, official mitzvah of the Torah. That the Torah tells me in Bereshit, be fruitful and multiply. Beautiful. That the Torah tells me about the milah of Abraham Avinu. That's history. The real mitzvah of the milah comes in Perashat Tazria. Then the Torah throws me a mitzvah called the prohibition of Gid and Nashe is because of the struggle between Yaakov and the Malach. Hazako Baruch, by the way. Hazako Baruch. But so if the entire or the main purpose of the Torah are the mitzvot, so don't tell me stories. Go straight. So the Torah, Perur Bu, comes later. Again. So I said, so the Sefer Bereshit is a book that does contain mitzvot, but Sefer Bereshit contains behaviors of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously, and reactions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even Adam. Yesterday morning, what did we say when it came to Adam Arishon. What can we learn not to do from Adam Arishon? I think I spoke to you about it and the boys yesterday, right? Assume responsibility. Don't blame others. Yeah, besides your wife. But there are those who don't even need to blame the wife. They blame everyone else. They blame the weather, the government, the politics, the Senate, Tallahassee, the rabbi, the synagogue, the mother-in-law, your wife. Yani, they blame the entire world besides themselves. And the Torah is telling us, don't act like that. No, right. Yani, Adam Rishon is blaming God. Listen, my wife initiated it, and if you would have not given me her as a wife, I would have not done it. That was a strike against Adam Rishon. And who am I to speak about Adam Rishon? Nothing. Adam Rishon, Tzaddik. But if the Torah brings me this scenario, that means there is a lesson for us. That's why the Pirkei Avot, the famous Pirkei Avot, it's based on Sefer Bereshit. That's why Sefer Bereshit has a nickname. Sefer Hayashar, the book of the righteous, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. So from the beginning of Bereshit, the creation, to the end of Bereshit, is a book of lessons. What to do, what not to do, not to be embarrassed. I'll finish with this. I may have said this, maybe, but if I did not say it, I think you're going to like it. A few months ago, maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago, there was a convention of rabbis in Miami. Rabbis from all over the United States, except Brooklyn and New Jersey. The rest of the United States was represented. Why? Because it dealt with rabbis which deal with kiruv, outreach. Not every community has what Brooklyn has to offer, what New Jersey, Deal, Lakewood has to offer, what Miami has to offer. There are rabbis that live in small towns, in small places, in areas that you think, wow, there is spiritual work to do. You'll be surprised how many isolated communities, small, are there. You know that Las Vegas has a mega kollel? Sure. In the kosher side of Las Vegas. No, not in the Villaggio, and not in the Luxor, and not in the MGM Grand, whatever they call it. There is a name of the neighborhood. I don't remember the name. No. They don't cross. They don't cross the main highway. They stay on the other side. Anderson, right? Now, you know there is a kollel, and they have Daf Yomi, and they have Shiurim, and I spoke to one of the rabbis. They have there 100,000 unaffiliated Jewish people. Unaffiliated. No. And like that, there are hundreds of congregations all over, small, minute. So I was asked to speak. He said, Rabbi, we have 7 speakers. You on top. 5 minutes. You know, for me, 5 minutes is only the introduction. It wasn't easy. So I said to myself, what I'm going to say to 60 rabbis? What I'm going to tell them, the Perasha? What I'm going to tell them? So I pray, Hashem, I have 5 minutes. What message do I give to 60 rabbis? Not 60 people. I can speak in front of people, but in front of 60 rabbis, what I'm going to say is like one day, I was in Deal for the summer, for one weekend, And I prayed Sunday morning in the West Deal Synagogue with Charlie Saka, alav shalom. And Rabbi Kassin Shelita says, Rabbi, you came right on time. He said, what happened? He says, Hacham Shlomo Amar is coming. And I was told that you're a good translator. I need you to translate. Rabbi, I came here to listen, not to speak. He says, Rabbi, I don't take no for an answer. Charlie Saka said, you're going to translate the rabbi. Okay, I also need to make a prayer because I need to translate to the chief rabbi of Israel. It's not pashut. So they prepared a beautiful breakfast for the rabbi. And coming back to the rabbi's convention in a minute, they prepared a magnificent breakfast for the rabbi. And the rabbi starts talking. Every 3 minutes, I signal to the rabbi, let me translate. In the middle of the speech, Rabbi Amar, maybe record it in video. He says, Rabbi, I don't understand. I speak 3 minutes, you speak 10 minutes. I speak 2 minutes, you speak 8 minutes. I don't understand. Why can't you translate what I just said? So I go, move on. I said, Hakam, you have to understand. Many people in the audience may not understand your code words in Hebrew. So you speak and 3 people laugh. Those who understand. Or they smile. Aha, yani, I understand. But I got to dissect what you said. So the whole room laughed. He laughed, and everybody, applauded. Says, okay, continue. You understand? True story. It's in video. Let's go back to the rabbi's convention. I said to myself, what I'm going to speak about it. I can't speak about the parasha of the week. It's not a derasha. It's a message to the rabbis. Rabbi Yedid was the guest of honor that night also. And Rabbi Yizrahi. So we were 5 or 7 speakers. I was one of them. So I said to the rabbis, and I said to them, there are 2 things that you must do to be successful in your holy work. 2 things, I said. Number 1, don't compromise in halacha. Sometimes when you are out of town and you're in Kiruv, sometimes you say, okay, lenient. Guess what? When somewhere in the north is lenient, we deal with the headaches after. Because then people become more connected. They realize that they have to relocate. They come to us, and then you start to discover all kinds of surprises, halachic surprises. So he said, number 1, I use the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that I started in the beginning with the story of the mezuzah. Unkarevan la Torah. Your goal is to lift the people to the Torah, not to lower the Torah to the people. Because every generation that tried to do that, what do you think the Reform and Conservative movement intended to do? They thought, okay, if we are more lenient, more blending in, we make it better, easier, we'll attract more. And guess what? They are near retirement. There was a convention of Reform rabbis 2-3 years ago. And the president of the committee says, we need to learn from Chabad Lubavitch how they do Kiruv, and they attract people to become more observant. So one of the rabbis says, that's the answer. They help people to become more observant. You become connected to God. By default, you grow. So they made a decision that day. What was the decision? From now on, the Reform movement encourages to put on tefillin on Shabbat. You have. So that was message number 1. I said to them, don't compromise when it comes to the halakha. And number 2, and that was a heavy weight a heavy missile for many of them. And I got the feedback afterwards. I said, don't be embarrassed to say, I don't know. I need to ask. When I said that, you can hear a pin drop. And I illustrated a few examples without names. I said, I don't know, I don't know. Hazako Baruch, Hazako Baruch. And I deal with this on a daily basis. Sometimes people ask me questions. Good question needs research. Let me ask. Let me find out. I said, don't look at it as a sign of weakness that you must say, I don't know. The opposite. The opposite. You say, I don't know. I need to ask. Okay, Hazaku Baruch. At the end of the day, rabbis are humans like the rest of the world. You think we know everything? We know nothing. The more we learn, the more we realize we know less. That was my speech, and I stayed 5.5 minutes. 5.5 minute speech. I think it took me the same here. Okay, my good friends, I wish everybody Shabbat Tov Mevorach. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. אמן באמן. רבי חנניה בן הקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל. לפיכך ירבה להם תורה מצוות שנאמר, אדוני